So I first of all want to apologise for not having been here from the beginning. I don't really approve of speakers turning up and speaking and then going away again. But I've been in Budapest for the last week, and we were supposed to have a book launch on Friday night of the Hungarian translation of Ambedkar and Buddhism. But although the book has been published, the launch didn't take place. Anyway, that dictated that I came a bit late. I have to say I'm a little underslept. I've slept on too many gypsy beds all over Hungary, most of which are shaped like this. And last night I was on a noisy corridor, so I'm not as on the ball as I'd like to be. But coming from this time in Hungary, I'm still sort of digesting the experience that I had there. As probably many of you know, I go to Hungary twice a year, and I stay for a week. I go through an adventitious connection with a group of Roma who connected with Dr. Ambedkar and his work, and I discovered about that and started going. In fact, the first time I went with Deva Mitra and Arlo Kavira, who are both here. Arlo Kavira's photos are still on every wall in the various gypsy settlements that I go to. And it's been very, very rewarding work, although in completely unusual ways. I'm an activist by character and somebody who wants to initiate and make things happen. There's nothing I can do in Hungary. I'm white, educated, middle class Englishman, and I'm moving into a situation in Hungary, which is Central Europe, is another culture, completely different culture. People see things in very, very different ways. And of course, they have not got the long, slow history of democratic development and relatively free and open society that we have here. It's still, in Hungary at the moment, it's rapidly going backwards. And there's shades of the 1930s, to be honest. Very strong echoes of anti-Semitism and, of course, particularly anti-Gypsy. So I'm not really equipped for this situation. I don't speak the language. I don't understand the mentality. I can't read people's faces. I don't know what's going on inside them. And I've got to know it with Gypsies, but I can't really understand Hungarians, which means white people, yet. But I've just kept going. I don't know why. I've just kept going for 13 years now, twice a year. Something has made me keep going, even though to begin with I used to feel actually quite upset, lonely, a bit useless. Sometimes the sort of banter around could be quite brutal even. No, brutal is too strong, but not very immediately sensitive, let's say. But I just kept going, held by something which I don't quite understand. And over time, I've become friends with a number of the leading figures in this particular section of the Roma community, and making more and more friends from different sections of Roma society. And not much opportunity to talk about the Dhamma, but some little opportunity. They're mainly interested in social change, and they do recognise Dr. Ambedkar's vision, and they're interested in that, but they're so much caught up with the immediacy of their situation and keeping a school running against a great deal of obstruction from the government and so on. And very, very unpleasant, difficult circumstances all around them. So I've just kept up the connection, and they've gradually become friends, and they say they value my visits very highly. I've no idea why. Or rather, I do know why. I don't think it's really very much to do with me. I carry something that I am not responsible for, that by a series of accidents, maybe including, no doubt, my own karma in the past, I've connected with the Dhamma through Urgyan Sangharakshita, through Bhante, and connected with it not merely as a set of postulates, a set of teachings in a merely conceptual way. I've connected with it as a living reality, or the living reality, which has driven my life, has lifted my life ever since I encountered it. And when I go to a situation like Hungary, which is the situation in which I'm most passive, if you see what I mean, or least active, least able to be active, I just have to remain open and take opportunities when they come, and be prepared for my nose to be banged when the opportunity disappears. But I do it, not very consciously, but by remaining open to this deep, deep, deep spirit that I've inherited from Bhante, from the Buddha via Bhante, and that is sustained for me by the order. When I go to Hungary, which is, as I say, the most unusual situation I've ever been in, and where I am least directly capable of doing anything, I do so sustained by Bhante and by my membership of the order. I'm not thinking all the time, oh, I'm a member of the order, it's going to be all right. It's more just the sense of myself as connected to this large international community that keeps me buoyed up and keeps me relating. Last weekend, we had, for the first time, a general retreat. Up until now, I've worked almost entirely with Roma, insofar as I've worked at all. And I have given some public talks, but mainly I've just connected with my Roma friends, our Roma friends, some of whom are Mitras. But this time we organised an open retreat. Nityabandhu was supposed to come, but unfortunately was ill and not able to come. Dana Samudra came with me, and we worked very, very well together. So we had a room full of people from the Roma community and white Hungarians, some Jewish. They're often the most liberal-minded and most interested. So we had a sort of a real cross-section of Hungarian society, which is a very, very divided society, and getting more so. And there were tensions in the room while we were together. People were uneasy about each other. And I realised that I needn't worry about anything. There's nothing to bother about. Just keep on being present, being friendly, using whatever opportunities came to teach the Dhamma, especially emphasising the metta bhavana, because that is a direct confrontation with that sort of division in society. Very, very powerful. In that sort of situation, when you teach metta, you realise that probably people on both sides will never have consciously tried to develop metta for the other side, so to speak. And there was quite a bit of discussion, mainly from the Roma side, about whether you should develop metta for an enemy, which is a fascinating question. Actually, if they want to achieve their objectives, they have to develop it, but that's another question. And again, I just saw the magic of the Dhamma that was coming through me and Dana Samudra, and our experience of the Sangha as informing our relating to these people around us, so that they caught from us a little touch, a little flavour of the Sangha as well as the Dhamma. Just a little flavour of that came through, because I, as an order member, carry that within me. And especially with another order member present, I'm able to... it's not something I do. When I say able, suggests it's something I do. I do communicate that, or that does communicate from me, through me. And by the way, it was the only retreat I've ever been on where we had smoke breaks between meditation. But at the end, no great hurrahs and that sort of thing, but people just quietly saying how pleased they were, they'd hoped for this, they'd hoped for that, but what they'd got was something quite different. And just the night before I came away on Friday night, speaking to one of the Roma who'd been present, and he was sort of talking about the metta bhavana and how he thinks, well, yeah, this is the answer to everything. Metta is the answer to everything, and that this Buddhism, it sounds really good. I want to know more about it. And his wife, who I've never heard speak before, just saying how much she got from the meditation. I could see that while she was meditating. She was really deeply absorbed. She's just finishing high school in her late 30s. So I could see that what we brought, which is not really to do with us, is what is carried in us as a result of what, in my case, I feel I got from Bhante, and that is sustained by my membership of the order. I think without the order, I could not sustain what I've gained from Bhante. So that's where I've come from, and obviously it launches me straight into my theme. I've been given this title. It wasn't my choice. In fact, I only discovered about it 2 weeks ago. Contrary to widespread discussion on the issue, I had no idea that's what I was supposed to be talking about. And I thought it was just a sort of general, what the order means to me sort of talk. And that's probably what I'm going to do. But yes, I was given this rather large title, which seems to imply something. First of all, I had to try and work out what it was that I was revisiting. I gave 2 sets of talks in the early 1990s on the theme of what is the order. And of course, in 2009, was it? Bhante had a conversation which was called What is the Western Buddhist Order? So I'm not sure what to revisit. So I'm not going to revisit any of them as such. I'm not going to try to have a commentary on a commentary on a commentary, as it were. I'm just going to talk about what the order means to me. I'm going to talk about it, and I want it to be quite clear that I do not think that this is the last word or the only word, or that people have to agree with me. How could I think that? I'm not that stupid. I'm a particular person, a particular character with a particular history, particular place in things. And I'm speaking from that. I don't think that if people disagree with me, it means they're not part of the same order. Of course, if disagreement gets too great, well then really there isn't enough to feel that one's a member of the same community. I don't think we're at that point yet. I think we're some way from it, although sometimes I think we get driven to positions that imply that. I don't think we have to. I think there can be a certain amount of disagreement, or quite a lot of disagreement. It's not that disagreement is per se good, as I've heard some people say. It would be far better if everybody spontaneously thought in the same way. It's extremely unlikely. But I think that disagreement does require us, first of all, to face our own attachments, because if you're upset when somebody disagrees with you, it implies that there's some attachment to what you're upset by. I know. And also, that when there's disagreement, you're forced to clarify your mind. You can't simply just say that's wrong. You've got to say why it's wrong, and also you've got to try and understand what is being said behind even a wrong expression. Quite often I find I agree with the reasons why people are saying something. I don't agree with the way they put it or the conclusion they come to, if you see what I mean. So I think discussion and debate within the order is inevitable, healthy, and can be the basis for a deeper mutual understanding and a more effective order. So I embrace that. Reluctantly, I have to say, I'm a bit lazy in that respect. I prefer to think my own thoughts and work things out for myself, as it were. I'm not much given to argument and dialogue, but not because I disagree with them, but just because of a sort of characterological disposition. But I think that one has to realise that in this increasingly complex world with an increasingly large and complex order, there will be disagreements. The main point is that we need to make sure those disagreements do not get to a point where we are defining two different conceptions of the order. At that point, we've ceased to be members of the same order. But as I say, I don't think we're anywhere near that point. I think it's just a question of us embracing the new reality, especially the new reality that social media and internet create, without thinking this is something bad. I think it's the way things are. You can imagine, well, in fact, people did say it, didn't they, when Gutenberg first did invented the movable type printing press. Some people said this was the end of the universe. Every technological change has disadvantages and has advantages, and it's a question for us, which I'll return to at the end, of embracing the advantages and trying to be aware of and minimise the disadvantages. So, when I'm talking about the order, what the order means to me, I'm not necessarily expecting you to agree with me. I'd be really stupid if I did. And I don't exactly mind if you don't. I hope you will think about what I have to say, and I hope that some of you will recognise in my particular phrasing something that is similar in your particular way of putting things, if you see what I mean. I can't speak for everybody. So, that by way of preamble to guard against any sense that Subhuti is telling you what to think and what to feel. Apparently this is what I do. If only. Or rather, if only you'd do it, you'd be so much happier. So, for me, the order does really begin with Bhante. It's not just for me, is it? For all of us, the order begins with Bhante. And it's not just that it begins with Bhante in the sense that Bhante very cleverly thought out a good basis for a new Buddhist order. It's not, in the terms of the Pali Canon, hammered out by reason. It's inspired. Bhante was inspired to found the order. The order is the expression of his inspiration. And by inspiration, I mean something that arises within the individual that comes from beyond the individual. Not merely enthusiasm, which is just personal excitability, audatya in the hindrances. Inspiration is a sense of something arising within one that is not definable as oneself. You know, traditionally you think of the muse or whatever. So I strongly believe, I could even say I know, that was what inspired Bhante to found the order. That Bhante was inspired to found the order. And he's an exceptionally clear-sighted, in many respects, not all, and very reflective man. And the basis that he set up for the order, founded on that inspiration, is what has made the order so successful and important to us all today. For me, that inspiration that came through Bhante arose, my sense of it arose very early on. Even before I knew Bhante, even before I encountered the order and movement, I saw Bhante just walking down the road. I lived quite near where he lived, and I just saw him walking along the road. And it seems incredible when I say it, but simply the sight of that figure had a deep impact on me. I mean, he was wearing long robes and a cloak and long hair, which was pretty unusual for a guy in his 40s or whatever. So my eye was attracted. But having been attracted, I saw something in that man that I'd never seen before. And when I finally came to meet him, I didn't actually make the connection immediately, but I saw that continued, that this man was in contact with something deeper, higher, that transcended him as a particular person. You could say that there are different sort of aspects of people. People live on different levels. We all live on different levels. So Bhante has a sort of personality which not all of us find congenial all the time. He has a particular sort of background and style and so forth, which, yes, some respond to, some don't. Bhante's got a certain sort of mind. He's exceptionally well read, very broad in his range of interests, very, very perceptive in some areas, not in others, and so on. But then there's a deeper aspect which we all have access to, but which in him lives in a very powerful way. I remember it very strongly at my own ordination. Probably everybody can remember their private ordination. I remember going up into a room at the top of the house in the Thetford Woods, and seeing Bhante sitting there just the other side of the room. And I can't really describe the experience, because it wasn't as if there was a person there in the ordinary everyday sense. That there was something ageless, not impersonal, well, maybe suprapersonal, something that was not, which beyond my ordinary experience of human beings. And very simply, very kindly, very carefully led me through the ordination ceremony. But I went away just bowled over by what he carried in him, which particularly communicated itself through the mantra, which is the Vajrasattva mantra. I'd never met the gentleman before, but I was introduced to this mantra, and I didn't get anything right as he pronounced it, but he just kept going. And my name, something was communicated to me through the name that was quite definitely beyond us as individuals. A very, very powerful effect on me, and probably others will remember this too. I met Bhante at a level beyond him as an ordinary personality, him even as a very good mind. I met him at a spiritual level. Those sort of experiences continued for me, and I could tell you so many stories. But one of the most striking for me was during the time at Madhyamaloka, at the end of Madhyamaloka, when Bhante was not able to sleep for quite a long time. Nityabandhu was looking after him at that time. And if you can't sleep, whoever you are, it has a huge psychophysical effect, I believe, under the Mano Niyama, if you see what I mean. And when we would be asked to go and sit with him, and I went and sat with him, and he was clearly suffering hugely. Lack of sleep, then drugs that probably made it worse, and created a physiological imbalance that was extremely psychically painful to him. You remember he said that annus, he described it as annus horribilis, and that he experienced both ecstasy and agony. Well, he was in an agonized mood. that time I was having difficulty with Bhante. And I think it's sort of inevitable that some of us will have difficulties with Bhante. So I can quite understand that people are having difficulties with Bhante now. And it was for similar reasons to the reasons that people are having difficulty with him now, some people. Yes, I had a lot of difficulty with him, which was extremely painful to me because he was so important to me. I faced a sort of tremendous internal struggle. I couldn't even talk about it because the two sides of the conflict were so strong. They sort of blocked each other. And also, when I did talk about it, I usually talked on the negative side, which then I could see influenced other people. So it's really very, very difficult indeed. So I was seeing Bhante with this all in my mind and seeing that he was, as I say, manoniyama, not working at all well and in a lot of distress. And I remember the thought coming through my mind, how can this man be my teacher? You know, how could this man who's completely sort of, his functions have all gone. He's not able to process properly because of lack of sleep and because of the medication he'd taken to deal with the lack of sleep. He was, not presenting a very pretty picture, so to speak. Absolutely, as that thought came through my mind, I experienced a vast consciousness in the room. And I can only tell you, you don't have to believe me, but I know it, I experienced it. This huge, infinite consciousness that was somehow, that somehow even contained this not very well-functioning manoniyama consciousness, if you see what I mean. The two were living parallel to each other. I was bowled over. I actually had to sit down, or sit back rather. I was sitting down, but I sat back. I just completely unexpected, especially when it came at a time when I was, in a certain sense, just about to say I've had it. I don't say he did it. It's just that opened me up to where Bhante lives. So for me, Bhante brought the order into being on the basis of that vast consciousness. Yes, on other levels, not everything was as it should be. Not everything was sorted out. We know. I don't think that Bhante's sins are the sins that people think they were, if you see what I mean. I think that where he... anyway, we're not going to go into that. But I think that one needs to understand better from the inside. Doesn't mean it shouldn't have happened. But I don't think it is what people think it is. Very clearly, Bhante blundered, and he's admitted and apologised for that. But that's quite a small part. Not, of course, if you're the one who's hurt. I can quite understand that. But in the total scale of things, there's something much vaster at stake and at play, which informs our whole order to this day, and which for me is essential to what the order is. Now, I do appreciate that a lot of you have not had that experience of Bhante, at least in personal contact and communication. Quite a lot of people do have that experience of Bhante without direct personal communication. Probably 600 order members in India. And they really do. It's not blind faith. Not at all. Please don't think that of our Indian order members. They're very astute, actually. Even if they're not always that sophisticated in their mode of expression. They really do recognise what Bhante has done for them. And they feel it's the presence of what he's ignited amongst them, if you see what I mean. But I know that for some of you this is not the case. You don't, for whatever reason, experience that from Bhante. And it's not that you should. How can I say that you should experience what you don't experience? Of course you can't. But nonetheless, I think that we cannot avoid Bhante, if you see what I mean. We can't avoid him. Because when he founded the order, was a completely new creation. There are more orders in the Buddhist world now, rather like our order, but in 1968, it was absolutely unique. There was nothing like it anywhere in the world. Well, there were things that were, half like it or whatever, but the complete package that it came in, and the particular perspective that Bhante had on the Dhamma, it was unique. He'd been building up to it over the years, even from the survey. You can see Bhante setting out the outlines of his particular presentation of the Dhamma. And the Three Jewels takes that much further, and then all those early talks that he gave before the order was started and then after the order was founded, all set out his particular vision of the Dhamma and his vision of the Sangha. And it's unique. So when you're ordained into something particular. You can't be ordained into a general Sangha, if you like, if you see what I mean. If anything is to exist within space and time, it has to be particular. It must be this, not that, if you see what I mean. You cannot have a general particular. You don't have to be a great philosopher to work that one out. The particular must always be particular. And the order has taken a particular shape and form which was quite unique. It doesn't mean that you can't feel part of the greater Buddhist Sangha. I do feel part of that. And I do feel a connection with some people from other Sanghas, pretty deep. But I feel a special connection, a deep connection with all of you, because we share the same understanding of what the order is. And that understanding isn't just a list of facts or principles or something like that. It's a felt thing. It's something that draws you, that when you're ordained, you know that you're part of it, and that you share with others. So that came from Bhante. Nobody else has done that. They've done other things. They founded other orders which have their own particular spirit, if you like, their own founding vision and their own particular principles and so forth. It's not the same. On another level, we can share with them. But in the particular, we don't. We share with each other. And that conception comes from Bhante. We cannot get round Bhante. Of course, we could, if we all chose to, if we all decided, no, we want to redefine the order, we could. I'm afraid I wouldn't agree, but you might want to push me out of the order. But do you see what I mean? That the only way we can revise the conception of the order and the spirit on which the order is founded is by a completely common consent. And I don't think it's too much to say that cannot happen. We can, of course, the order develops, it evolves, and that evolution has to be negotiated again and again and again. But the founding spirit cannot be without us all sitting down in a vast hall and agreeing. And I can tell you, you won't even be able to explain to 600 order members in India why you want to do that and what you're trying to do. They just will not get it for very good reasons. We cannot dispense with that essential spirit that Bhante brought into being in the order, or with the principles that he embodied in the order, which I think have stood the test of time remarkably. Some years ago, I wrote, at Bhante's request, a booklet called A Buddhist Manifesto. And Dhammarati took it to a European Buddhist Union teachers' conference and gave it away. And they went like hotcakes, apparently. And quite a number of people came to him. Some wrote to Bhante. Nobody wrote to me. Saying, we agree. We agree. This is the basis for Buddhism in the future. And a number of leading teachers have been saying, well, Sangharakshita was there 60 years before, 50 years before the rest of us. As they begin to realise they've got to break free of so much of the cultural and other baggage of Eastern Buddhism. So, yes, for me, the order, without the recognition of Bhante's unique founding position in it, the recognition that what we share, what makes us members of the order, is a spirit and a defining of spirit that initiated by him. We have to work out how we deal with that in the future, and I'll come to this in a moment. We have to allow it to evolve and change, because times change, and we change, we grow. A number of us have been at it for many, many years, and hopefully have some degree of at least ordinary wisdom, if not more. So that brings about different kind of community. There's communities, the order now exists in depth. To begin with, it was just Bhante and a bunch of ex-hippies, all of whom were broadly under 25, I think. Maybe a bit older, one or two cases. Under 30. Well, some of us tell you, I'm pushing 70. Next month, I'll be 70. I'm going to retire, I'm warning you. You can start rejoicing. I am. I'm wanting at least to retire from the college. I think 70 is quite enough. I haven't yet got full consent to that, but I want to back away from these sort of responsibilities in the whatever it is, the coordination of things. I've done enough. But yes, some of us are at a point where we're able to think about retiring in a positive sort of way. Work just as hard as ever, but in a different way. So obviously the order is going to need to change and develop, and we need methods whereby that can happen. They're probably never going to be very efficient or highly formalised or whatever, but there does need to be some understanding that we need to work together to bring that about. Not just develop something on our own separately, but in some kind of dialogue. And for the orchestration of the dialogue, we have various institutions, chairs meetings, etc., order convening meetings, international council. We have the college. And we need some institution that has more continuity, that can sort of sign off on negotiations, so that once we've come to an understanding, can make the final decision. And that's the college. The college has that responsibility because it's handed to it by Bhante, and given what I've already said about his place in things, it should be clear why that's important. But another thing is extremely important about the college that I think is not often realised, is that actually public preceptors, private and public preceptors, are made with broad consent. I know this because I initiated this when I was chair of the college. We have a consultation process where everybody's voice is taken seriously. Sometimes, of course, the voice is not able to be reconciled and something may have to happen. But broadly speaking, none of the preceptors are appointed without pretty much total, at least non-disagreement. So have I got that right? Right number of negatives there? Yes. We don't ask for a vote pro, but we do give room for a voice ante. So I think that's extremely important, and a responsibility that falls on all order members. You have an influence on the formation of the college. To that extent, I think the college has this long-term continuity. People are likely to be in the college for 10 or 15 years until they retire, and have the trust, first of all, of Bhante, and then of those who've been appointed by those appointed by Bhante, etc., and has the broad consent of, or at least broad non-consent of the order. And every 7 years, there's a review period. And again, take this seriously. If you're not easy about what's happening or about anybody in particular, speak up. You have to have a real point, not just, I don't like the cut of his jib sort of thing. You have to have some real reasonable argument, and that's sometimes a difficulty. But that needs to be gone into. And we always take an independent view. We have somebody outside the college who validates the decisions that are made. So it's extremely important. The college has this central position because with a large community over many different continents, with many different cultures, extremely difficult for us to get everybody even to understand the issues, let alone to sign up to them. So we have this slightly unwieldy, but nonetheless essential process of discussion in various different fora, which eventually lead to a decision by the college. And that, I think, is essential to our future, that is maintained. Of course, it's essential that the college members take that responsibility in the right spirit, which, by and large, I think they do. Similarly, we have this whole business about commonality of practice. I was a leading champion of this discussion, and unfortunately my style seems to put a lot of people's backs up. I like precise definitions and so forth, which to some people smacks of the law court. It's not the way I think of it. I'm merely trying to define principles for the discussion about what practices we do. In the end, you have to follow your inspiration, don't you? If you're inspired by something, you have to follow it through. But if you value the order, you'll try to make sure that your inspiration sort of coincides with the practice of others. If there's too great a divergence, it becomes more and more difficult to recognise in each other membership of the same order. I've had this experience sometimes. People have talked about, say, meditation from a particular universe of discourse, which I'm completely unfamiliar with. And we have a common, stable of discourse. Stable of discourse? That doesn't sound very good, does it? Armoury? No, that doesn't sound very good either. Collection of discourse, which we have in common. And as long as we maintain, Bhante says, a high degree of commonality of teaching and practice, we will be able to recognise each other as members of the same order. Once we begin to just not really know what other people are talking about because the vocabulary is so idiolectical, it's a sort of a Buddhist dialect that is not a common amongst us, you begin to feel, I don't know what they're talking about. Further, you can even feel, I don't like the way they're talking. So there needs to be, I think, on all our parts, especially from this point on, a real willingness to work to maintain the unity of the order by not setting aside our own inspirations, of course, but by trying to work those inspirations into the common body of the order. Certainly before we start teaching them widely, and definitely before we start teaching them within the movement. It can be extremely disruptive for centres when people come with a new package of inspiration, which they start teaching at beginner's level and so forth, without any discussion or any real merging of understandings. So that there needs to be, on the part of those who are perhaps temperamentally more conservative, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but who want to conserve, who are keen to make sure there's continuity, there needs to be flexibility on their part to try to understand, and there needs to be a willingness on the part of those who have new inspiration to work that inspiration into the overall body of the movement. It may take some time, and it'll probably be quite frustrating, but if we don't take that effort, I think we will gradually vociferate. I'm sure of that. We will vociferate one day, and we will fossilise one day. But let's not do it before we need to, because of this unity and strength of the order that we still have, even though we've got a little bit scratchy with each other recently. Because of that, I'm able to go to Hungary and carry that spirit with me and touch the lives of people who have been brought up in one or two cases, the worst conditions I've ever seen, even in India. I've not seen worse than I've seen in Slovakia. Just conditions in which human beings should not be asked to live. And we're touching their lives. The Dhamma as we know it, the order as we know it, touches their lives. We're communicating to them a sense of a community that goes beyond difference and separation and all these tensions that exist within society. So that, for instance, having white Hungarians, Jewish Hungarians, Roma gypsies, we actually had 2 Ethiopians as well, just to add to the variety, and 3 Indians, all sitting in a room together and all sharing the same experience of metta, of Maitri, and loving it and feeling, yes, we can go beyond these divisions that are absolutely intrinsic to, certainly to Hungarian society. Because we are an order and still have a strong sense of a shared understanding and shared vision, shared experience, we're able to carry that wherever we go. Alone, if I'd gone to Hungary, I'm nothing. I'm just a strange white guy who I'm nothing. I've got nothing to give them. But carrying, as it were, you with me, carrying Bhante and that spirit that Bhante founded the order upon, I'm able to be something for them without any effort of my own. So this is at least my understanding of the order. And I think it's probably one that, with a little bit of adjusting of phraseology here and there, probably it's not hard for others to understand, and I hope to share. I think if we get to a point where we don't share enough, we should, in a gentlemanly way, just part. I don't think there has to be a big bundle about it. I think we just can quite politely say to each other, I think it's too different, let's be different orders. We're so far from that, I hope. But I think we need to touch on what we have most deeply in common, which for me is expressed in terms of this spirit that for me comes from Bhante, but that is embodied in the order as it lives, even right now in this room. So I want to conclude with just a few thoughts about the future. I've made these points before, but they didn't quite get into circulation as I wished them to. First of all, I want to endorse the perhaps rather uncomfortable process of exploring our past. Personally, I feel I've come to terms with whatever wrong I've done, whether in speech or body, but I don't know that I have with everybody whom I've harmed in any way. And I'm certainly willing to and would like to. If I've done anything that has been harmful to anybody and it matters to them, I'm very willing to see it through, given constraints of time and space. And I don't feel anything to fear in our past. Yes, we've done things that were unfortunate, were wrong. I think we did have young guys and gals a rather narrow conception of things, and we pushed it sometimes, some of us, in a rather aggressive and insensitive way. We've got to come to terms with that. I think we're far better than that now, but still it happened, and we need to recognise that, acknowledge that. That's the, if you like, the muck from which we've grown. So I personally endorse that process. Got quite a lot I'd like to say myself. I'm just not getting time to write. I think there's a lot more to be said about the spirit of that early period than just to point out the problems. There's a lot about the way in which we were together that was extremely inspiring, and which is the what you lot have inherited, to be frank. By and large, the problems have been purged or are being purged, but I think the spirit that we inherited from Bhante and interpreted in our own foolish ways it is something that we can rejoice in. For instance, Croydon has a mythology. It's become a myth, a Croydon, and it becomes a sort of just a word. You just say, well, Croydon, and everybody knows what you mean. Actually, it was a very mixed bag. There was a lot that was really good in it, and it's such a shame when things get sort of seen in black and white terms, and very positive things get missed whilst we're dealing with what was definitely unfortunate and even wrong, unskillful. So I'd like us to continue exploring our past, but I'd like those of you in the present who weren't there in the past to recognise you don't really know what it was like, and that when you read something about something that was wrong, it's not all there was. There was a lot else. It's the classic problem of historiography, isn't it? How do you, in the present, read the past? The 60s, 70s, even into the 80s were times of great experimentation in the sexual field and fields related to it. It seems so wrong now when you look back on it, but at the time it was kind of whoopee. I never got a chance, but anyway, that's another story. So let's apply a little bit of sort of historiographical sophistication to our discussion about the past, and recognise that we don't really know, and that there's always far more to the picture. There's a lot more to Bhante's relations with people than comes out in the ordinary discussions. You cannot imagine what Bhante was like at that time. He was young, relatively young. He was extremely vigorous, and he had an intense impulsion to communicate, to break through. Absolutely remarkable. He doesn't present like that anymore. So when we're reading the past, let's acknowledge what was wrong, but let's recognise that there's so much more to it. So I applaud this investigation of the past, but I hope that we bring out much more of that larger spirit. And I certainly intend to do that myself. I just don't get any time for writing at the moment with India and other things. So I want to endorse that process. I don't think that we've got anything to be afraid of. Personally, anything I've done wrong, I don't mind confessing to, admitting. I don't feel it's anything I need to hide or keep in the background. I'm not going to point the finger at anybody else. That's not my job. My job is simply to talk about myself. And, as you all know, confession is freedom. When you confess, you're free. And I'm quite willing to do that. Often I don't know what I've done. But when I do, I'm quite willing to fess up. Of course, the second thing is I do hope that we come to a more balanced appraisal of Bhante. I've been trying to say how I see Bhante, and I don't find any difficulty in acknowledging that, acknowledging what I've talked about today in Bhante, and recognising that some things happened that people felt hurt by. I don't find any difficulty in that. It doesn't diminish him in my eyes. So I hope that we can come to this general recognition and be able to rejoice in Bhante, because if we can't, I think we're doing something to our own connection with the order, because the order is so much founded on Bhante's perspective, Bhante's this spirit that came from Bhante. If we don't have a positive sense of him as having something more to him, then I think it'd be very difficult to maintain a single order. The word reverence has been used, that people ought to reverence Bhante. The problem is we don't have a positive word that does the job. Reverence is so vitiated. It's like disciple, isn't it? I really don't mind being called a disciple, but it has connotations for other people that I acknowledge are complex. So I think, whilst I'm not insisting that anybody feels reverence, if reverence means something that they find problematic. But I do think we need to have some sense that we owe Bhante so much for what he brought into the order and that still lives within it. We need to have some sense of him as having that, and not dismiss him as not being on this level or that level because of this or that, like a sort of engineering diagram. We have to sense Bhante as Bhante is, not as we theoretically work it out on the basis of late scholastic interpretations of the Dhamma. We need to have that sense of Bhante as a living force, as embodying a living force, a living Dhamma force. Otherwise, I don't see how we can really value what it is that what holds us together. 2 more points, and I'll make them quite quickly. I do think we need to revisit the whole question of what we used to call the new society, a vitiated word, a vitiated phrase. I think we need to re-look at our single-sex institutions, communities, co-ops and so forth, or whatever they are nowadays, right livelihood businesses. We need to try to find a way of speaking about them that offers them as a Dhammic opportunity without having a critical polemic against other choices, if you see what I mean. Whilst one might want to have a critical discussion of the difficulties and dangers in all situations, if you see what I mean. But I think that it's extremely important there are these intensive environments, particularly for young people. I think they find them very, very attractive. If that hadn't existed for me, I dread to think what would have happened. But many of us will want to continue in those. By a set of strange circumstances, I'm out of them for the time being, although actually 2/3 of my year is spent in them. But I think they are extremely important for the future of our order, because they give an intensity that's difficult to get on the internet or even on a regular meeting once a week. And I really hope that we come to value those and be able to encourage people to participate in them without, getting nasty about anything else, if you see what I mean. I think we need to move on to that sort of positive appreciation of the semi-monastic. That's the word I was groping for, the semi-monastic. Of course, there's so much more to say about that, but I hope that we can come to a new and positive appreciation of the importance of the semi-monastic. Finally, I hope that we can embrace wholeheartedly the internet age. I think that some of us have a sort of an aversion to it. I have a Facebook site, but I've never looked at it. I don't know whether anybody else has either, but I don't really want to do that. My life is busy enough and full enough already. I don't want to do that. But I think if some people are not doing that, and particularly younger people are not doing that, we're not going to be reaching a wide range of people. And I think we need to be best at these modern media. We need to be showing how they can be used extremely well. And one of the things I think we need to do is to learn a new shila, a new, ethics of the media. Some of the things that have been said in the order debate, I think, are shameful, really shameful. Some of them have been said about me. Frankly, I don't care anymore. Say what you like. It's okay. I've come to terms with that. I've realised that I don't have to get upset. Sorry if you wanted me to, but it is shameful, really, that we talk about each other like that. And whilst I think it's fair enough to discuss, Bhante and his actions, I think some of the ways people talk about him are really disgraceful. I don't think we should talk about any human being in that way, let alone one to whom we owe so much. So I would like us to develop an ability to have a really free, full, frank discussion. Can't work any more F's into that, which is sensitive, respectful, reverential to each other, if you see what I mean, in which we acknowledge that we don't know other people's motives. One of the most annoying things is having motives attributed to me. Apparently motives were attributed to me giving this particular talk, when I hadn't even chosen the title. I think really one ought to go away and give oneself 6 of the best if you do that. I do it. I speculate about other people and so forth. When you do it in a public medium, it becomes something else. And then, of course, what happens is people adopt that interpretation and it becomes fact. We've all got to get used to the fact that anything can be said about us and stop caring. That's our practice personally, and I made it into a practice. But I think that we also need to make it into a practice that we talk to each other openly, honestly, even intellectually disagreeing, but without harshness, without interpretation of motives, and without dismissal. We need to give each other the honour and respect to take each other seriously and to try to attribute the best motives to the other person. I think that's a very, very important part of our future. I think if we cannot ignore this media, I know some people just want it to go away. It's not going to go away. And it has many advantages, many, many advantages. And even I know some people have found a life in the order because of it, which is fine by me. I don't think it's enough. I think there needs to be actual presence together as well. But it's better than simply no contact, a lot better, and can be even very good indeed. So I think we need to embrace it, but we need to embrace it intelligently and ethically. So I'd like to suggest that we need to have a discussion amongst us about the etiquette, the protocol of communication through the internet, not just with other order members, with anybody. It's protocol for communication with anybody, which applies particularly within the order. I think if we can do that, if we can come to terms with our past, if we can look at Bhante with honesty and not disguising what we see, but with a genuine sense of who he really is in his deepest dimensions, and we can revalue our semi-monastic institutions, and we can talk to each other through these modern media in a sensitive and respectful, even reverential way, I think the order will only go on from strength to strength. And I'm personally not at all worried about the future. I have been at times a bit sort of bothered about the way things are talked about, but on the whole, I'm pretty confident. When it actually comes down to it, when it comes down to action together, we're pretty good. So whether I've just revisited what is the Western Buddhist order or not, I leave it to you to say. But I have tried to communicate what the order means to me and what I hope for from the future of the order. Thank you.